welcome to a new reading vlog. Just as an update for what I was reading, I am 224 pages into A Discovery of Witches, and I'm actually going to set this aside. I am really enjoying it, but I went into spring break with a specific TBR that I wanted to read, and I want to do sort of a week-long readathon, and I wanted to finish this before that, and I just didn't get to. And so my reading plans for spring break are a little bit ambitious. There are 4 books on my TBR. My plan is to reread the Twilight saga by Stephenie Meyer. Obviously, starting with Twilight, I got a new set from my friend. I bought her paperback set off of her because I'm planning to annotate them as I go. I have read this series a lot. I'm trying to think. I think as a whole, like in order, I've only read it maybe 3 times, but the individual books, I know each of them I've read more than that. I've read Breaking Dawn probably 6 times. So I felt like rereading this series. It's been a while, and I just really have been craving that, like, just comfort reads, I guess, like something that I'm really familiar with and something that I know that I love. And I know not everyone loves this series, but I do, and I'm really excited to reread it. Right now, today, I'm going to a couple bookstores, but then tonight I'm going to start rereading Twilight. Hello, so reading update. It is about 11 p.m. It's still Monday, and I am on page 218 of Twilight. I started at like 4 or 5, I can't remember. But I'm enjoying this reread so much. I've been marking, tabbing some things. I was gonna do like a color code system and stuff, but then that just sounded like too much work. So I am just marking mostly just parts that are my favorite, things that I kind of forgot about, and if anything particularly interesting is like foreshadowing, I've been marking that. And then I'm also annotating, just like underlining favorite lines and like writing little comments and da-da-da. And I'm really enjoying that. I haven't done that with a lot of books, but I really like that. And look what I found to use, an Edward bookmark. And the back says, what if I'm not the hero? What if I'm the bad guy? So classic. I am really enjoying this reread, and I'm gonna go sit down for a bit longer. I think I can get another good amount in and be able to finish this in the morning maybe. Hello, it is Tuesday morning now. I have a bit of a late start. It's almost 10 a.m. but I am making my coffee, and I have about 150 pages left of Twilight, so I'm gonna sit down and just finish this all. I'm really excited. I obviously know in pretty good detail what happens at the end, but I'm excited to reread it. I've been really enjoying this. After I finish, I'll go through a lot of my thoughts and like stuff that I tabbed and stuff. I'm gonna go drink my coffee, eat my breakfast, and finish Twilight. Hello, so a reading update. It is 12:30 and I just finished Twilight. I loved rereading this one. I'm just so familiar with the story. It was just so relaxing to come back to this world and reread these characters and their stories, and I really loved it. 5 out of 5 stars, obviously, but like, who's surprised? I will move on to New Moon later today. I just have some chores to do and some homework I should probably start on. So yeah, spring break is fun, right? I wanted to go through the few things that I did tab. I didn't tab a whole lot. I did make quite a few notes. A lot of the time I would just underline stuff that I found important or just lines that I liked. Most of them were just like scenes. So one of the first thing from page 20, it's the first time Bella sees Edward, and I love that moment in the movie, and I just really liked it. Next, the scene that I tabbed was when they are doing microscope assignment in lab in biology, and they are like passing it back and forth for some reason. I just really love that scene. Just think it's kind of funny, and I really enjoy it. The next scene that I tabbed was when Edward saves Bella from getting crushed with Tyler's car. That's another one that in the book, it is really good. It's different because you're seeing it from inside her mind, and she's obviously very frazzled, confused, doesn't really know what's going on. In the movie, that's probably one of my favorite scenes because I think their use of soundtrack in that scene is just fantastic, and it's just the first time we get to see Edward as like what he really is, and I really like that. Next, I tabbed the classic line, "What if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the bad guy?" Just because it's like on its surface is a little silly, but like it's actually a really good quote, and I just really love it because it's a classic. One of the next things I tabbed is on page 123. They are on the La Push beach when everyone goes there. Sam is actually there when Jacob shows up, and I didn't realize Sam was mentioned so early in the book. It makes me wonder, because Sam is the one that says the Cullens don't come here in the book, and I was wondering if he was a werewolf already at this point or not. I'm not sure. Next, on page 195, the quote from Bella that they use directly in the movie. So the quote is, "About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, and there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him." I really, really love that quote. Next thing I tabbed is probably my favorite scene in the whole book. Honestly, if not in like the whole series, I love this scene. It's the scene where he says, "And so the lion fell in love with the lamb. What a stupid lamb. What a sick, masochistic lion." I just think those words are so beautifully written, and I really, really enjoy this scene. Next, I jump ahead. My next tab isn't till page 404. I went a long time without tabbing anything. And this is a part that I completely forgot about. I know Jasper goes with Bella to Phoenix when Alice and Jasper take her, but in the movie, they don't focus a lot on what Jasper does and says, and he has a little bit more of a part in the book, and Jasper is one of my favorite characters, so I really enjoyed seeing this little part for him. He says, "You're wrong, you know," and Bella says, "What?" And he says, "I can feel what you're feeling, and you are worth it." And she says, "I'm not. If anything happens to them, it'll be for nothing." And he just says, "You're wrong." I just really liked that little moment from Jasper because I really, really love him. Next, my last tab is on page 495, and I just marked it. A quote that I probably would have never even recalled being in the book, but Edward, when they're at the prom, says, "It's twilight again, another ending. No matter how perfect the day is, it always has to end." And that is such a perfect quote to, one, put at the end of the book, two, calls in the title, obviously, but I also think it just sort of summarizes the whole series. It sort of really foreshadows that everything must come to an end, whether that's talking about Bella's life or the series itself must come to an end, or even only going forward to New Moon, where their relationship comes to an end for the majority of that novel. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking for a long time, but yeah, finished Twilight, less than a day, I'm not surprised. I think I'm gonna throw on the movie while I do the other stuff, just because I love the first movie, even though it's a little ridiculous, but it's got a killer soundtrack, and I really love it. So I will update you later when I start New Moon. So it is 10 o'clock and I just put a face mask on, obviously, and so the day has sort of gotten away from me and I haven't started reading yet, but I still have a couple hours before I need to go to bed, and I am going to go start reading New Moon. A reading update for Wednesday. It's already about 10 a.m., but I'm getting around to reading some more New Moon. I didn't stay up too late last night. I only stayed up till like maybe 11:30, so I only got to page 159, but that's a pretty good amount in. I think there's still like 400 pages left, but I think I can finish it today pretty easily still. And I am enjoying it. I like we're just starting to get to the part where Jacob comes into it and they're rebuilding the motorcycles and everything, and I do like that part of New Moon. I like seeing her relationship with Jacob develop. I mean, New Moon definitely isn't my favorite, so I'm excited to get more into it. There's a lot of details in this one. I think because it's a longer book, they don't all make it to the movie, and I don't remember a lot of them. I've read this one 3 times maybe, and it's been a long time since I've read New Moon. I will say, I was just looking down at this cover. I think this cover is my favorite. Like, the apple is iconic, and the ribbon in Eclipse is kind of cool, and the chest piece I do like, but like this is just the most beautiful cover in my opinion. Anyway, that was me getting sidetracked. I'm gonna go keep reading. So just a bit of an update. I am on page 256, so I've made some more progress. I'd say about halfway. I'm making another cup of coffee back there, and I still have a couple hours before I'm doing anything. I actually got ready and did some makeup, made it feel like I wasn't just lying around in my pajamas all day. I'm going to go drink that coffee and read some more. Hello, an update. My hair is a whole mess because I'm lying in bed and I need to take my makeup off. But I just finished New Moon a little bit ago, and then I got started on YouTube for a while. But I finished it. Still not my favorite, but I really liked it. And I like Alice got a bit of a bigger part in this one. I didn't tab that many things considering how long it is, and most tabs were just like cute things that Jacob said. I love Edward. I always have. He was always like one of my favorite characters, but I think it just would be so interesting to see what the story would be if it took a different route and Jacob became the main like love interest. I would love to see like an alternate universe. I'm sure there's one like on the internet, but like a true canon one would be really interesting. I think I'm gonna go read the first couple chapters of Eclipse, but I'm gonna go to bed. Okay, so I actually just did my update for Eclipse, but I was looking at some of the clips that I have for my other updates, and I realized my New Moon update you couldn't see me. So I'm just gonna pretend that I'm going back in time and I'm updating for New Moon. New Moon is not my favorite out of the series, but there was a lot of things that happened in this one that I think are important overall to the whole series, and I'm just gonna go through a few of the tabs that I have. They are mostly just cute Jacob scenes that I like. The very first thing I tabbed was a line from page 74 after Bella is in the forest, which again, this is like one of my least favorite parts, the part where Bella like gets lost in the forest because I'm like, girl, you're so dumb. And I just marked it because it has the title in it. It says, "Not tonight. Tonight the sky was utterly black. Perhaps there was no moon tonight. A lunar eclipse. A new moon. A new moon. I shivered, though I wasn't cold." So yeah, that's why I marked that page. Quite a few tabs, including this one on page 118, where I just mark parts where Bella is sort of describing her grief and her pain, just because I really like the way Stephanie Meyer writes it. I like the imagery she uses of like the actual hole in her chest, and that's what is on page 118. On page 145, one of my favorite ways that Bella describes Jacob, she describes him like an earthbound sun. Whenever someone was within his gravitational pull, Jacob warmed them. And I just really, really love that, and it so perfectly describes who Jacob is. One of the next ones on page 188 is just a small moment that is isn't really one of my favorites in the book because it's nothing significant, but in the movie it's the part where Bella crashes and hits her head, and that's what happens in the book when they're riding motorcycles. And in the movie, Jacob, in the movie and in the book, he takes his shirt off, and it's just a great moment in the movie, so I marked it in the book too. And then a little bit after that is when Bella says, I just hadn't realized before. Did you know you're sort of beautiful, to Jacob? Just because I think that line is fantastic and hilarious. So on page 214, I marked this thing that I just think is so, it's just really interesting and telling and sort of foreshadowing the supernatural world that they're going to be a part of very soon, that Jacob is going to be a part of very soon. He notices the scar on Bella's arm, and he's like, "That's a funny scar, how did it happen?" And she's like, "Can't say anything," and it's just a foreshadowing to what is coming. On page 267, this is after Jacob has turned, and him and Bella are talking about it, and it's when they both first realize that they know each other's secrets. Jacob knows about the Cullens, and Bella knows that Jacob knows about the Cullens and all that, and it's just a really tension-filled moment. On page 292, I marked this page because this is when Bella has a dream and really realizes what Jacob is. She remembers the story he told her on the beach. Next, on page 376, I marked just this one little quote in one of Bella's ridiculous hallucinations. Edward tells her, "Be happy," and it's a moment where I think Jake and Bella are just about to kiss, and they don't. I like the idea that Edward would really want her to be happy no matter what that like what that looked like, what that entailed. Page 408, I marked another spot where Jake and Bella almost kissed, just because I love all those near moments. Do I wish that they, you know, turned into something? A little bit. This is one where he actually discusses how he breaks that promise again. He promises that he won't hurt her, and he keeps breaking that promise, and I just like that storyline that goes throughout, you know, starts in this one and then goes throughout the rest of the books. The last tab I have, this is when Alice and Bella are on the plane on the way to Italy. Alice mentions, like, I feel like I should just turn you and, you know, get it over with. This is too much trouble, da-da-da. And I didn't mark this because it was like anything really that important. I was just thinking, like, what if Alice did turn her right now? Maybe not literally on the plane, but like right around this time, like how would that have changed the story? I thought about a lot of those little pivotal moments in New Moon, in Eclipse. Like, what if this did happen? How would that change everything? The biggest idea with that I had in New Moon especially is, what if Edward didn't come back? The other one is, like, even if Edward did come back, what if he came back to Bella and Jacob already together? I think it would have been really, really interesting to see more of a relationship between Bella and Jacob. While I really, really love Edward, I think it would just be really interesting to see Bella and Jacob develop a lot more. Still enjoyed it. Still gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I'm trash for these books, so. Little reading update. I just got up and my hair is real messy and I'm still in my pajamas. But I've got some coffee and I have about 300 pages left in Eclipse. I didn't get as far as I wanted, so I'm hoping to finish this morning. We'll see. I'm gonna go read. I finished Eclipse earlier. This one took me a lot longer than I wanted. Hopefully I'll still be able to finish Breaking Dawn. But I thought I would just quickly go through some of the tabs that I did. Overall, I really enjoyed Eclipse. There was a lot of emotional growth for Bella, and I just really enjoyed it. First thing I have marked is the story of imprinting and just sort of that like lore and stuff, and I just sort of marked that for referencing. Next thing I marked is a bit later on page 154 is where it starts. It's the beginning of Rosalie's backstory and just her telling her story. I really, really like Rosalie, and I like hearing her story. Is like terrible and sad as it is. I do really like hearing that from her. The next is a quote from page 176, and it's about imprinting again. Jake is talking, and this is something they sort of use in the movie as well. And he says, it's hard to describe. It's not like love at first sight, really. It's more like gravity moves. When you see her, suddenly it's not the earth holding you here anymore. She does. But like, I just really like that quote about imprinting. The next thing I marked is on page 235, and this is a scene not in the movie, and this is a scene I've completely forgotten about until now. Bella was bringing the bike that her and Jake fixed up, hers, to the Cullens to drop off. Edward was like, you know, you can, if you like to ride that, you can ride that, da-da-da. And he had gotten one for himself. I think that's this part. But he gets her helmet and like a leather jacket, and he says, you look sexy. And I just thought that was such a funny part, because she's like, dude, I look dumb. It was just, I like that it was like reading that scene for the first time because I didn't remember it at all. The next part on page 292, I marked Jasper's backstory, him telling his story about the wars and everything, just because Jasper, I really, really love Jasper, and I wish he had more of a section, like more of a prominent part. That might be part of why I enjoy Eclipse so much, especially the movie, because Jasper gets a lot of screen time. So my next tab is on page 327, and it is when Jacob declares his love for Bella. A couple pages later is my next tab, when he says, until your heart stops beating, Bella, I'll be here fighting. Don't forget that you have options. And this is the scene where he kisses her for the first time and she punches him in the face. I love that scene. Should Jacob have done this? No. Do I think it's a hilarious scene? Absolutely. So I ran out of purple tabs and had to switch to pink at the end, so that's annoying. The next thing I marked is on page 442, which is probably the thing, other than the ending, I most vividly remember from Eclipse before coming back and rereading this. And this is the scene where she first proposes to Edward that, fine, I'll marry you, and I'll even I'll make deals with you about turning me, da-da-da, but I want to sleep with you first when I'm human still, because she's scared of what she'll be like when she turns. And I just think it's one, a really romantic scene, but two, also kind of funny, and it's just a lot of layers, and I really like it. Just after this scene is when Edward like officially proposes to her, and he has the ring and everything, and that's on page 460. I marked that one too because I like the scene where Edward proposes. One of the next things I tabbed on page 494, this has moved forward. The battle it's the night before the battle. This is when Jacob is warming up Bella because it's freezing outside. Edward and Jacob have their conversation in the tent, and I just think there's a lot of really interesting things that go down in that scene, and I like seeing them not work together entirely, but it's definitely a shift in their relationship. Next, I feel like in Eclipse, I got so distracted in New Moon, everything I was tabbing was about Jake, and then in Eclipse, I just was still in that mentality and like tabbing a lot of Jacob scenes. But on page 525 is when Bella stops and asks Jake to kiss her so he doesn't go off and get himself killed. And my little note at the bottom says, I love Edward, but also I really love this scene because I do really like this scene. I like Bella's realization that, you know, she loves both of them, even if she loves them in different ways. It was a lot of emotions, especially for Bella. This is one that I had forgotten about, but it's after the battle, after Jake had been hurt, she's back at home talking to Charlie. Charlie says, but I have this hunch, I feel like I'm going to lose you soon. And later he says, will you tell me before you do anything major, before you run off with him in something? And it's just this really heartfelt scene between Bella and her dad, and I just really loved it because I love Charlie so much. I'm so glad how things turn out with Charlie in the end. Next is a quote on page 600, and I just marked it because it is the title. Jake is talking. He says, the clouds I can handle, but I can't fight with an eclipse. I feel like Eclipse, while it is Bella and Edward's story, this one really, you really get to see a big arc in Jake's character, and I think this title and this line really encompasses that. My last tab is actually on one of the very last pages on page 627, and it's something because I had forgotten, and because they don't do it in the movie. I'm gonna read it because I really like it. So Edward sends a note with the wedding invitation to Jacob, and it says, I'm breaking the rules by sending you this. She was afraid of hurting you, and she didn't want to make you feel obligated in any way, but I know that if things had gone the other way, I would have wanted the choice. I promise I will take care of her, Jacob. Thank you for her, for everything, Edward. And I just really liked that because it really just shows that they kind of can get along in a way. Eclipse, done, 5 out of 5 stars. I'm gonna start Breaking Dawn tonight. Breaking Dawn is my favorite, and I've read this a lot of times. Like, I want to say this will be my 6th time. I haven't really kept count, but yeah, I've read this quite a few times, and I'm really excited to reread it, hoping I can still finish before spring break ends. Hello, a reading update. It is now Sunday night. Did not finish Breaking Dawn before I left back for school. Obviously, I am back. Get a lot of reading done on the drive. Then I came back, unpacked, and did homework and But I have 100 pages left of Breaking Dawn, and I am going to go finish that right now. I'm so excited. Breaking Dawn is really my favorite. I love it so much. And then I will probably do the wrap up of all of this tomorrow. And so I'm gonna go read. Hello, I wanted to do a final update for my reading vlog. Did end up finishing Breaking Dawn last night. I wanted to just go through some of the tabs that I did. This one is my favorite of the series. I love it so much. And like, I know a lot of people don't like this book, but I really love it, and I don't think there's anything that could really change my mind on that. One of the very first things I have is when Bella and Edward go to tell Charlie that they are engaged, and Charlie just like assumes that she's pregnant. One, because I think it's a funny scene. Two, it's kind of foreshadowing. Then the next thing I have is on page 83. Edward and Bella are on their honeymoon. This is the very first night that they're there, and Bella says to herself, don't be a coward, and that's when she goes to meet Edward in the water. And I love that scene. Next, one of the parts that stands out to me the most, page 138, it's right before we get to Jacob's part. Last part from Bella's point of view in book 1 is she says, Rosalie, it's Bella, please, you have to help me. And I just really like that Bella thought to call Rosalie, and their relationship that develops thereon I really like. A little bit later on page 177, I have marked a scene between Jacob and Edward where Edward is asking Jake to go talk to Bella, talk her out of this crazy idea that she is strong enough to carry the baby. I just liked, there's a line that says, "This was the face a man would have if he were burning at the stake," just because Edward really hated seeing Bella deteriorate in that way. I like that that's sort of where the beginning of this relationship between Edward and Jacob start in this book, and I really like seeing that develop, especially towards the end. They call each other brother, or at least Edward does, and I really like that. The next thing I have marked is something that's not in the movie, and it is something that I had forgotten. Conversation between Leah and Jacob, and Leah says she does sort of understand Bella and Rosalie's perspective in that, like, wanting to keep the baby and take care of it. Obviously Jake does not like that, but Leah just is explaining her point of view, and I really liked it. So on page 326 is the first time Edward can hear Renesmee's thoughts when she is still in the womb, and I like that scene because it's definitely a turning point. Next, on page 359, mark the moment that Jake looks at Renesmee for the first time, and the imprint is like that, and he just melts, and I love that scene. They do it in the movie so beautifully. I love it. Jumping forward a little, on page 449, another great scene with Jake, but this is when Bella yells at him for imprinting on Nessie and for nicknaming her Nessie. I think this whole scene is just hilarious, and I love it. Next, on page 495 is when Jacob is explaining that he phased in front of Charlie to sort of introduce him into this world of like supernatural stuff, and I just really like, because Jake was so desperate to keep them there, and I just think it's hilarious that they brought Charlie into it like that, and I mean, it worked out. So later in the story, on page 558, is when Alice leaves them a note. This is after she leaves, and there's a note that says, "Don't look for us, there isn't time to waste." And then she tells him, look for witnesses and stuff. It's just a part that I had forgotten because I knew Alice left, but I just liked reading her note. On page 595, this is such a good turning point. This is when Eliza finally, he says, with a shield for a wife, and Edward's like, what? And they finally realize that her mental block is actually a power. Next, on page 722, is they are facing the Volturi, and they think it's about to take a turn. At least Bella thinks it's about to take a turn for the worse, and so she turns to Nessie and is like, "You remember what I told you?" And she had told Nessie, like, "You leave with Jacob, you don't look back, you two escape." And that scene just makes me really sad. And even though, like, obviously none of that had to happen, but it was really sad. I remember watching this scene in the movies for the first time when they sort of showed what the war or what the battle could have been, and like Jake and Nessie trying to escape and everything, and I was so stressed, but I loved seeing that what if. Then a little bit after that, on page 732, is when Alice shows up to the witness thing with the Volturi, and she brings her own witness, and that goes really well because she found someone else who was half vampire, half human, and sort of solves everything, as Alice does. Then the very last thing I marked was when Bella shows Edward her own memories, because she's able to push the shield off of her own mind so he can see, and I just love that scene. And for Edward to be able to see everything he has not been able to see in her mind this whole time was just such a special moment. I love the last line. And then we continued blissfully into this small but perfect piece of our forever. The end. I love Breaking Dawn, and like low-key want to start over. I have read this book quite a few times, and I've loved it every time. Overall, my thoughts on this little readathon I did for myself, I'm pretty impressed that I did finish it through spring break. I had to bring Breaking Dawn back up here, but I finished it last night, which was still technically Sunday, so still spring break. I'm really glad I chose to reread these. I love just the immersion, and like, you just keep reading. They're so easy to just gobble up. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.